Hey guys, how's it going and welcome back. In today's video, I want to address one of the questions from one of my students from my Udemy course that pertains to mocking and doing unit tests on networking via Combine Framework. So if you can see on my screen right now, I'm on my Q&A section here, and I think Ziv is asking about generic network layer. So I think the final question that I want to address is the last part over here. I understand, can you mock the way it did? That arrived from the network. Can you please abstract API service you did, because lots of stuff over there is hard-coded. So in summary, how to do mocking for API calls using Combine Framework. All right, so I'm going to address how to do that in this video. But before I do that, I want to show you the course that my student is enrolled in. So I'm gonna just promote this for a little while. So this course is called iOS 14 and 5 and Swift 5. I know it's iOS 15 now, but the principles are the same. And this course is about building a dollar cost averaging calculator to project potential returns for financial assets like stocks, equities, and ETFs. And in this course, I cover a bit of unit testing as well. And as you can see, this course is rated 4.8, so it's pretty high, and it has 77 ratings. All right, so do feel free to check it out and see if this is something that's suitable for you. Okay, so especially if you're new to unit testing. All right, guys, so I'm going to start to show you a demo project right now, and I want to show you what we are trying to achieve over here. All right, so let me just bring that out of the way. Okay, so over here I have a very simple starter project. All right, it's very simple. So as you can see over here in the main.storyboard, I have a view controller with a label in the middle. Okay, so this is just a plain old vanilla label, and inside the view controller I'm making an API call to an endpoint over here. So I'm gonna just show this to you very quickly. So I'm fetching some users information from this URL string. Okay, this is the JSON Placeholder site, which allows you to, which is this one over here. Okay, so if you come over to this website, this is basically free fake API for testing and prototyping. So you can actually just make any API calls. So I'm going to use this one over here, /users. And this URL returns to me an array of user information. So as you can see, this is a square brackets, 10 items. And within this 10 items, this is how an object is going to look like. All right, so we have the ID, the name, the username, email. Okay, I'm not really interested in all of that. What I'm interested in is just the name over here. All right, so as you can see, the last name is Clementina. The first name is Liana Graham. So if I am to run my project over here, okay, notice that, what am I getting? Let's see. All right, so we have Liana over here and Clementina at the bottom. All right, so what I did was I fetched all this information, all right, all the 10 items over here, all right, 8 items, okay, it's 10 because I think it's just 8 elements inside. So the 10 items over here, and then I'm going to extract the name and just put them together in a string and just display it inside the view controller. All right, so I'm going to write a unit test for that so that, you know, our code is properly tested. And I'm going to show you how we can transform a project like that into one that uses MVVM and is testable. All right, so let's go through the code that we have over here. Okay, so we have a very simple view controller, just 28 lines. And inside, we import Combine Framework. We have an IB outlet that's hooked up to it already. And over here, I'm using a service called User API Service, and I'm calling the fetch user function over here. All right, so what I'm getting is an array of users, so which is, this is an object, so an array of user. And then I am mapping them and joining them using a comma and just printing it out on the label. All right, so let's dwell in the user API service. Okay, so as you can see here, we call the fetch users function, and this return any publisher. All right, and it has users as well as error. So if in a success case, we get an array of users. If there's an error, we return an error. Okay, so very simple stuff over here. If you have done Combine Framework networking, this should be something that's very familiar to you. Okay, and for the strut, the domain model, I kept this super easy. All right, so we're just interested in the name. Okay, So this is the finished product. So I'm going to give you a glance of how it's going to look like. All right, so we are going to implement a view model over here. And this is pretty much the same. Okay, the difference is that we're going to get the view model to make the call instead. Okay, and the view model will update the UI. All right. And inside over here, we are going to implement a protocol, all right, so that we can mock this. And of course, we have our unit test over here as well. So I think previously when I wrote this, both of them should pass. So yep, both of them has passed now. All right, so in this video, I'm going to show you how we can transform this into this. All right, so if you're interested, please carry on watching. All right, guys, so what do we want to do first? Okay, so we want to implement some kind of view model, and the reason why we want to do that is such that we can put all our business logic into the view model and we can test that. All right, so we are not really interested to test the view controller because the view controller is mostly a view, right? Ideally, we shouldn't have business logic inside. Any if else, any switch statement ideally should be inside the view model. Okay, so we're going to create a view model over here. So let's create a class and let's call this view model. All right, so what is the business logic over here? So on view.load, I want to fetch the user information, and then upon a success API call, I want to join all the names together and display them inside the name label. All right, so let me just use this as a reference. Okay, so what do I do? Okay, over here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to do func on view.load. So I'm going to call this function on view.load when view.load happens in the view controller, right? But before that, I need to create a view model over here. So let's maybe do it over here. So private let view model equals to view model. All right, something like that. And then I'm going to do inside the view.load, I'm going to cut all this over here and just paste this inside over here in the meantime. All right, so I'm going to do view model dot on view.load. I'm going to do something. All right, so firstly, I'm going to create a private function over here called fetch users. Okay, so I'm just gonna put this inside over here in the meantime. All right, so in the view model, I'm not going to use user API service directly. Okay, so this is what we call a concrete class. Ideally, if you understand the solid principles, we want to use abstractions instead of concrete classes. So we're going to make a protocol, all right, so that we can call the protocol method instead of the concrete class. Okay, so how am I going to do this? I'm going to first create a protocol here. So I'm going to call this user API service. And what is the signature? All right, so the signature will be this function over here. All right, so I hope you're following so far. And then inside the concrete class, I'm going to make this an implementation that conforms to the user API service. So at this point in time, everything should still compile. All right. Okay, so now what I want is that I want to have that service inside. So private let user API service. So it'll be user API service, just like that. And then I want to introduce dependency injection over here. All right. And the reason I want to do that is such that I can mock that inside my unit test. Okay, so self.user API service equals to this. Okay, let me do a command B, and it's obviously going to break because right now to init this, I have to pass in a user API service. Okay, so this is going to break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use Xcode to help me with that. I'm going to say that I'm going to pass in the user API service implementation. All right, I hope that this is easy to understand. All right, so what's the next thing we want to do? We want to call, okay, let me look at my reference, what I did over here, display users, okay. All right, so maybe let's call this display users, okay, I think that's better. So on view.load, I want to display users. And instead of doing it like that, I'm going to do user API service dot fetch users dot sync. Okay, so this one I don't need anything, so I can just replace this with an underscore, and I don't need to handle this part over here, so I'm just going to remove this. Okay, so this is going to return to me a bunch of users, and then I think I'm going to just copy this over here, let text, and I'm going to map this and join them with a comma. Okay, so once I have this text already, what am I going to do? Okay, so maybe I'm just going to put a breakpoint on line 28 first, and let's run this and see what we are getting so far. All right, so let's hit the play button. And okay, so I believe nothing is going to happen, and the reason is because we have not added as a subscriber. So let's do that right now. So private var subscribers equals to set any cancelable, just like that, and then we want to store that inside over here. So subscribers. Okay, so let's run this one more time and let's see what we're getting inside the text variable. Okay, so let it run for a little while, and is it showing up? Maybe I just do PO text. Oops, can't find that. Or maybe I just put a breakpoint over here. Let's see. PO text. Do we have that? Alright, it's not showing up. Maybe let's just print this instead, and let's see if it's working this time. Alright, not sure why that wasn't showing up, but anyway, we're getting all these names over here right now. Okay, so what we want to do is that we want to update this information, this text, into our UI label. Alright, so how are we going to do that? There are actually a couple of ways to do that. So the first way to do that is to use a closure. So I'm going to show you two methods. Alright, so let's call this users users date complete, for example. All right, so we can do something like that. So you can choose what works for you. Personally, I wouldn't prefer this, but anyway, I'm going to show this to you anyway. All right, so I can do users date complete. Then I can pass in the text over here. All right, hope you're following so far. And maybe let's call a method called observe over here. Private func observe. So what do I want to observe? I want to observe this closure over here. All right, so it's going to complain. Why is that? Oh, it's because we're referencing an instance here. You're referencing this over here, and we have to add the self inside. All right, and let's add a big self here. All right, not complaining anymore, and then we can do view model dot users date complete. We have the text here, and then we can do self dot label name label dot text equals to text, and I believe we do need to have a weak self as well. All right, so I believe this should work. So let's see. Let's hit the play button, and I'm gonna put a breakpoint on line 62. Complaining. All right, let's see. Okay, so we are hitting line 62. Let's get rid of that, and let's hit the play button. And then we are getting all this text inside over here. All right, so this is one way you can do it. Personally, I would prefer to use a delegate instead, so I'm going to do just that. All right, so just remove this observe function. And I'm going to implement a view delegate, so to speak. So I'm going to create a protocol over here. Let's call this view model output. Oops, like that. Okay. And then I'm going to call this update label text string. All right, guys, I hope you're following so far. And then I'm going to do weak variable output view model output. All right, just like that. And then it's going to complain. So we have to put in any object, I believe. All right. So when I get my text over here, I'm going to do output dot update label, and I'm going to pass in the text over here. All right. Hope you're following so far. So we have not yet hooked this output to the view controller. Okay, we're going to do that in just a minute. So maybe let me just add this stuff over here. Okay, Command B right now, nothing should break. Should be good. All right, so what we need to do over here is we have to say, hey, view model, who will be the output? View model, who is going to be the output? The output is going to be the self. And who is the self? The self is the view model. And therefore, it's going to complain because if I do Command B now, we have to conform to the protocol, which is the view model output. All right, so whatever that you name over here, okay, we have to add that protocol method over here to conform to that. So let's call that view model output. And what that means is that once we conform to a protocol, we have to implement the protocol methods, right? So let's do it over here. So let's do mock. So what's that method? If you remember, it's called update label. All right, so name label dot text equals to text, just like that. Okay, oops, let me make this a bit bigger. All right, so this is going to work. So if I'm to hit my play button one more time, I'll be seeing the name label being updated as well. All right, so you notice that it took a while. You saw the word label and then it quickly got updated, right? Okay, so that means that our API calls are working. All right, so now that this is done, the question next is how are we going to create the unit test for that? So let's jump into that. Okay, I hope this is clear so far. Let's get rid of those lines. Okay, so let's create a unit test. So the way to do that is to go to the project and then let's create a new target and let's filter this by test. So unit testing bundle. All right, so I'm just going to use the default name that's being suggested, hit the finish button. And guys, before we write the unit test, we have to ask, so what are we really testing for? What is the business logic here? Okay, so the business logic in my view is on view did load, I want to check that we are making an API call. And if the API call succeeds, we want to show a bunch of usernames on the view itself. All right, and if the API call does not succeed, we do not want to call the update label. All right, okay, so let's do it over here. Let's come back to our test, and then we have to do add testable, import, and then we have to do combine API mock starter, which is the name of our project. And you might ask, why do we need to import this? The reason is because so that we can have reference to the view model. Number one, we have reference to the view model inside this target. And then we are able to also have reference to the strut as well as this API service. Okay, so let's come back here. And then I'm going to get rid of all of this because I'm going to write my own. And what do we need? We need the setup method. So I believe it's this one. So super.setup. And then the teardown method. Okay, I don't want a class func, I just want a func. So super.teardown. All right, so when we write unit tests, we have to have something we call a SUT. All right, so this is the convention, SUT. So SUT stands for system under test. All right. So what are we testing for? We are testing for the view model. Okay, so this will be of type view model. Okay, so of course, if you know this hypothetically, if this is a, let's call this a user view controller, then this view model could be named as a user view model. Okay, so I'm just showing you that this is something that you can. This name will be the same class name as this one over here. Okay, all right, so let's get started by setting this up. Okay, so SUT equals to view model, and we want to initialize it. Okay, so we have to pass in some kind of user API service. Okay, so this is when the magic of mocking really happens. And we need to create a mock class. And you might ask, why do we need to do that? Okay, because if we are to call the implementation, which is the one that is being that we did over here, this will genuinely make an API call to the network, which we do not want. Okay, we want to be able to control the result of this fetch users function. Okay, so let's come over here and let's create a mock. So mock user API service, and this will be of type what? What type is this? User API service. Okay, so I'm going to do a command B, or let me just hit the diamond button, and it's going to complain that I did not conform to this. All right, so I have to conform to the function over here. Okay, so this this mock class also has this function fetch users, but the difference over here is that rather than going to the network to make the API call itself, we're going to allow the test class to decide what to return. Okay, so I'm going to do var fetch users result. Okay, and then I'm going to say that this is of type any publisher. All right, I hope it's easy to understand this so far. And it's going to complain because we have not had combined framework imported yet. So let's do that right now. Okay, so it's going to sort of complain because we have not written anything yet. So I'm going to do if let result equals to fetch user result else. Okay, so if this is not nil, then we want to return this result over here, and we can do return result. All right, if this is not being assigned and if this is nil, then we want to just show a failure error to say that result must not be nil. All right, again, this is really up to you how you want to handle this. For me, I'm going to just return a failure error, but what you can do is that you might decide to return an error instead. But I think this would be a much better implementation, all right? Because if you do want to return an error, you can also put that inside over here, which I'll show you in the example later. All right, so we need to have the mock user. Okay, maybe let's do it this way. User API service. So this time, this will not conform to user API service. I mean, we're not going to have this, we're not going to conform to this protocol, but instead, we want it to be an instance of the mock instead. All right, so I'm going to do, oops, not this one. User API service equals to mock user API service. Let's initialize that, and let's pass that into this parameter over here. All right, so if I'm to hit the diamond button, I think it should still pass. All right, nothing's happening because we don't have any tests written yet. Okay, the next thing we want to do is that we want to also be able to check what is the text that's being written over here. All right, so you notice over here, we return this, where is it? We return this text over here via the view model output. So let's come back over here and let's create the output. Okay, so what we have to do, sut.output equals to something. So what is that something? All right, so let's see what type is the output. Let's see. The output is view model output, which is a protocol. All right, so that allows us to mock again. So let's come back over here and let's call this class view mock view model output, and this is called view model output. And again, it's going to complain, so we have to create the function over here, which is called update label. All right, so the way I like to do that is I like to do update label array, which is of type string, and I'm going to assign this to be empty. And every time this function is being called, we want to append this element into this array. Okay, so dot append text, just like that. Okay, so now we want to do view model output, and again we want it to be of type mock view model output. All right, so let's do it over here. View model output equals to mock view model output, just like that. And then we can just assign this to the output over here. All right, guys, so if you are still a little confused, I would urge you to just pause over here and just kind of understand the code first, okay? Before we continue. So let's hit the diamond buttons, and I think everything should be fine right now. Okay, so now we want to test for two scenarios, okay? So I want to test that. Okay, so what are we testing for? We want to test update text on view did load, with success API is called. Okay, so this is our first test. And then the next test we want to do is test update text on view did load with failed API is not called. Okay, maybe in fact we can improvise this later, okay, but this is the example that I had written earlier, okay, which is this over here. Okay, so I'm going to use this as reference. Okay, so when we write unit tests, there's a convention: given, when, then. All right, so when sut dot on view did load, but given what? Given a successful API. So the way I can do this is I can say user API service dot fetch user result equals to, let me see how I did that. Yeah, okay. So I have to return any publisher. All right, so if you notice over here, this is any publisher. So I can use one of the convenience publisher, which is called the current value subject. All right, so I can do it this way, and then I can pass in a bunch of users. All right, so successful API, I can do let users of type user. Okay, so I can do .init. I just have to pass in the name, so maybe let's call him Alex. .init, let's call this Brenda, and then let's have maybe Charlie. All right, so just like that, I can pass in the users over here, and I have to erase this to any publisher so that this type is this type over here. Oh, sorry, is this type over here. Okay, so given this successful API call, when view did load happens, then I can assert that the view output model, okay, so this will be called, this function will be called update label. And how do I know that it is called? Is because I can capture this text inside over here and pass that into this array. Okay, so I'm going to check the array dot update label array, which is this one over here. I want to check how many elements do they have inside. All right, so it's going to be 1, right? Because it's going to be called one time. So let's run the test and let's see if it's working. All right, it's great, awesome. But I think we want to go one step further, all right, to check how does the text looks like. How does the text look like? All right, so xct assert equal view model output dot update label array. We want to get the first element, and I'm going to say that it will be Alex, Brenda, Charlie, and I'm just going to make a mistake over here by just putting in 1, and I expect the test to fail. So let's quickly check that out. Okay, it's going to fail, and why is that failing? It says that Alex, Brenda, Charlie is not equals to Alex, Brenda, Charlie 1. All right, so now we can be very sure that our view model is working correctly. Okay, and the reason you might be asking why do we write unit tests is because we want to guard our code against unauthorized or incorrect changes from our teammates or ourselves in the future. Okay, so now we want to test update text on view.load with a failed API is not caught. So I'm going to copy almost everything over here, and then I'm going to make some changes. Okay, so I don't need this users, and right now I need to return a failure. All right, so I want to return this one over here, the error. So I think I can create the fail object arrow. I don't really need to pass in any arrow, so maybe you can do let arrow, and as arrow just like that. Oops, and pass in this here and do erase to any publisher just like that. Okay, so if I run this is definitely going to fail because I expect the count to be 0. All right, so let's run this and let's see. All right, it's going to fail, index out of range, because there isn't even an element inside the array. Okay, so I'm going to remove this and set this to be 0. And let's just rerun this one more time. All right, so now it passes. That's awesome. Okay, so now we want to go one step further, and we're gonna say that, hey, if there's an error, then we want to update the label to be no users found, for example. Okay, so we can do it over here. So if you remember earlier, I just ignored this part. So this part is where the if an error occurs, this is the block that handles it. All right, so this is called the completion, I believe. So this, I believe, is an array. So completion, we have failure. Okay, we don't need this, and then this one should be complete, I believe. Dot finish. Yeah, this one. Okay, so we don't really need the finish case over here. I'm going to break this. So this part of the block happens if there is a completion, which means it's finished, or a failure happens. Okay, so I'm going to do it this way instead. So let text equals to no users found, for instance. Okay, this, you can specify anything you want over here, and then I'm going to add a weak self here, and then I'm going to just copy this and just paste this over here. So in the event if the API call fails, we want to update the label to say no users found. All right, so let's come back here and let's run this, and obviously this is going to fail, right? Because right now we're actually updating the label. All right, so 1 is not equals to 0. This is going to be 1, and then I'm going to just be lazy and just copy this, and then no users found. I think this is the text that I did. All right, so I'm just going to rerun the entire 2 unit tests, and let's see if this is working. All right, guys, so both unit tests pass, and I hope that you find this video useful. Again, if you like what you are watching, feel free to check out my courses on Udemy. I'm going to leave a link at the bottom of this video, and I wish you the best and stay safe. Cheers. I'll see you. Bye-bye.